Okay, picture this. The dawn of the 18th century. Two massive forces are about to collide. We've got the lion and we've got the bear. And their clash, it's not just going to decide some war, it's going to redraw the entire map of Europe. Which brings us to one single dramatic question.
I mean, seriously, it sounds like something straight out of a fantasy book, right? But this actually happened. And to figure out how, we've got to meet the two major players at the heart of this incredible story.
So on one side, you have the Swedish Empire. These guys are the undisputed champs of the Baltic, a state literally built for war. They are feared across the continent. And then, on the other side, you've got the Tsardom of Russia. Yeah, it's huge, tons of people, but everybody kind of sees it as, well, a sleeping giant. A bit backward, way out on the edge of what's really happening in Europe.
All right, so let's start with the lion. At this point, Sweden looks totally unbeatable, and it's led by this young king who's about to become an absolute legend.
You gotta understand, Sweden's army wasn't just some random collection of soldiers. It was forged in the fires of the 30 Years' War. We're talking about a professional, super disciplined fighting machine that had been dominating battlefields for years. They basically had a stranglehold on the whole Baltic Sea.
So, you can imagine what happened next. A 15-year-old kid, Charles XII, takes the throne. And all of Sweden's neighbors, well, they start licking their chops. They see weakness. Russia, Denmark, Saxony, Poland, they all get together and form this secret pact to just carve up the Swedish Empire for themselves. They thought it was going to be a piece of cake. Oh boy, were they wrong.
Yeah. See, instead of just crumbling under the pressure, this boy king unleashes an absolute storm. What he does next sends shockwaves across Europe and pretty much instantly cements his reputation as a military genius.
His first move? Absolutely brilliant and completely audacious. He totally ignores the main Danish army over in Germany and instead leads this surprise amphibious assault right into the Danish heartland. Can you imagine? The Danes wake up and there's a Swedish army right at the gates of their capital, Copenhagen. Yeah, they surrendered almost immediately. Just like that. One enemy down, two to go.
So next, Charles swings his army east to take on Tsar Peter's massive Russian force, which is besieging the Swedish fort of Narva. And get this, the numbers here are just staggering. Charles has maybe 9,000 Swedes. The Russians, they've got around 40,000. I mean, on paper, this is an impossible fight.
So what does Charles do? In the middle of a blinding snowstorm, he orders a full frontal assault. It's a move that should have been suicide. Instead, it turns into one of the most lopsided victories in military history. And this number you're seeing, less than 1,500, that's the total number of Swedes who were casualties.
The Russians, on the other hand, were completely and utterly routed. Their army just dissolved. The Swedes captured pretty much all of their cannons, and just like that, Charles, who's now only 18 years old, is being called the Invincible Lion of the North all across Europe. But, and this is maybe the most important part of the whole story, standing in the wreckage of his army, Tsar Peter has this incredible moment of clarity. He realizes this humiliating defeat isn't the end. No, it's a lesson. A brutal one, for sure. But here's the real kicker. While Charles sees this victory as just more proof of his own genius, Peter sees it as a classroom. So while Charles spends the next few years chasing the King of Poland all over Eastern Europe, basically just obsessed with winning the next battle, Peter the Great goes home. And he begins this absolutely single-minded, top-to-bottom transformation of his entire country. The bear was finally waking up.
And this guy was ruthless and methodical. You see, while Charles was out there winning flashy battles, Peter was back home building a modern state. He literally melted down church bells to cast new, modern cannons to replace the ones he lost. He brought in officers from all over Western Europe to retrain his army. And, maybe most importantly, he built a brand new capital, St. Petersburg, on land he just captured from Sweden. It was his window on the West, and a forward base for everything he planned to do next. And you know what? It worked. All this reform paid off. While Charles was totally distracted with his war in Poland, Peter's new and improved army started systematically clawing back territory. They even managed to recapture Narva, the very place where they had suffered that massive humiliation. Talk about poetic justice.
Okay, so finally, in 1708, Charles is done with Poland, he's gotten rid of his rival there, and now he can turn his full attention back to Russia.
He is absolutely determined to march straight to Moscow and finish this war once and for all. This was it, the final showdown.
But the Russia he marched into was a completely different beast from the one he'd crushed at Narva all those years ago. Peter's armies were smarter now. They refused to fight a big, open battle. Instead, they just retreated, burning everything in the Swedes' path. And then, the weather turned. The Great Frost of 1709 hit. We're talking about the coldest winter in 500 years. That legendary Swedish army, it started to freeze and starve to death.
The real killing blow, though, came at a battle called Lesnaya. Peter's new army ambushed and completely wiped out a huge Swedish supply column. Without those supplies, Charles's main army was basically doomed. Peter himself knew how important this was. He called it the mother of the victory at Poltava.
So by the time we get to the final, massive showdown at the Battle of Poltava, the tables have completely 180-degree turned. Now it's the Swedes who are outnumbered, exhausted, and starving. Their brilliant king, Charles, he'd been wounded in the foot, so he couldn't even lead the charge like he always did. The Russians, on the other hand, were well-fed, well-supplied, and the reformed army was ready for a fight.
The result was, well, it was inevitable. The famous Swedish charge just faltered, and then it broke completely. That number you're seeing, almost 10,000, that's how many Swedes were killed or captured in just a couple of hours. This wasn't just a defeat, it was the complete annihilation of an army.
And the shockwaves from that one battle, they were felt all across Europe. In just a single day, the entire balance of power in the north had been shattered and then totally remade.
The once unbeatable Swedish army was just gone. Charles XII became a fugitive, fleeing for his life all the way to the Ottoman Empire. And his empire, the one that had dominated the Baltic for 100 years, as a major European power, it was finished. And that is why this all matters so much. Sweden's collapse created this massive power vacuum. And who was right there to fill it? Russia. Transformed from top to bottom by Peter the Great, Russia wasn't some backwater on the fringe anymore. It was now the new dominant force in the Baltic, a formidable European empire to be reckoned with.
Even the great generals of the time, guys like the Duke of Marlborough, were just stunned. They couldn't believe it. The sheer speed of Sweden's collapse was almost impossible to wrap your head around. Imagine 10 years of nothing but legendary victories, completely erased in just 2 hours.
So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of history isn't really shaped by big armies or economics, but by the will and ambition of just two people? In the end, this whole story of the lion and the bear is about so much more than just a war. It's really a story about two rival kings. One, a brilliant battlefield genius who was ultimately blinded by his own success, and the other, a ruthless visionary who learned from his mistakes and built a massive empire from the ashes of one single, humiliating defeat.